Hello, guys, and welcome to my Week 5 Thursday Night Football opening game prediction of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going and taking on their division rival in the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So, looking at this game and kind of looking at, the two teams that are playing, obviously we have Tampa Bay, who is leading the division, Atlanta, who now with the New Orleans kind of skidding, the last couple weeks, they are tied, in the second place spot with New Orleans. Looking at this game, there's just one thing that I really want to say. I think it's kind of bizarre to me that they're giving Atlanta a 1.5 point advantage. And I get that that's not very much, and that sort of thing. But they're also giving them, like a nearly a 54% chance to win due to ESPN analytics. And, just looking at these teams, having watched these teams, I think I'd like to start by talking about the Falcons. I think the Falcons, as everybody knows, they have been a disappointment this season. I remember when they signed Kirk Cousins, they paid him a ton of money, 100 mil guaranteed, coming off an Achilles injury when the dude was, less mobile than even Aaron Rodgers was before he had the Achilles injury, and essentially only had enough speed to really get out of the pocket, occasionally. And it's like primarily, if you want him out, Kirk Cousins outside the pocket, you're doing play action bootlegs. And you don't need much speed for that. You need a solid run game, which, Atlanta does have a pretty solid run game with Algier and Robinson. But to me, this is a team that has drastically underperformed. You're talking about Kirk Cousins having 4 TDs and 4 picks. He was really inaccurate early. I was like, what in the world is going on with him? I think he's kind of, got in a little bit better in terms of his accuracy, at the beginning of the season. But goodness gracious, he looks like he's finally starting to taper off in his career. Like, he used to be that. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Kirk Cousins was always that guy that it's like, oh yeah, this guy's going to put up stats. He's going to get the ball down the field. He's going to, have a good amount of touchdowns and that sort of thing. But it's like through 4 games, only 4 TDs with a talented roster like he has, where it's like he could be passing to Bijan, Pitts, Drake London, Ray McLeod, Darnell Mooney, who seems to be his favorite target and the most productive out of all of them, which is shocking as a guy who it's like the Bears didn't see fit to bring him back. Obviously, it's the Bears, but you look at this team and I look at, 3 guys at skill positions on the offense that were drafted, all of them, top 10. Which I think that London and Bijan, they were both. I think that Bijan was like, they were 8. Like they're top 8 skill position players, where Pitts was supposed to be a generational talent, crazy height, crazy speed, hasn't ever put it together. And many people blamed, it's because we don't have a quarterback. It's because we don't have a guy to get him the ball. They go out and they sign Kirk. And it's just, you can't tell me that the Falcons are happy with the way that he is playing. If it was me, I would be putting Penix in. I think Penix is literally going to be the starter like next year. It would not surprise me if Kirk, while he may not be released because of like fear of a cap hit or something like that, I wouldn't be surprised if Penix starts, and I mean, maybe even later this year. They're obviously in the thick of it in their division. Obviously there's not really a clear-cut like winner of their division yet. Like the Buccaneers only lost coming to the Broncos, which, I thought was kind of an anomaly, but maybe not. The Broncos Obviously, it was a pouring rain game type of thing. Also held the Jets to like no points, even though, Rodgers still had a good amount of passing yards, but they, and that sort of thing. So it's like, it's been a weird NFL season, but, I think it's still easy to tell who's really like not it. And the Atlanta Falcons, in my opinion, are not it. I do like their defense. Their defense, I think, is what has been really keeping them in games. Good players at all levels, well coached, and just, overall like elite talent that, competes its butt off on the Atlanta defense. But their offense, I mean, I just don't get it. I like Darnell Mooney. I'm glad he moved on from the Bears because he's been showing that he's a player that can be relied on. But it's like even he doesn't have a lot of yards. And, he's the go-to target besides Bijan. Obviously, I'm not going to really knock on Bijan. He doesn't have a lot of rushing, but he does have a good amount of receiving. He's always going to be one of those guys that gets his yards. And he's the star of this offense as far as I'm concerned. It's like if they didn't have Bijan, this place would be in a world of hurt because you cannot tell me that Algier is still going to average 6.1 yards a carry when they put him in, obviously, as kind of a change back and a power back, even though Bijan himself, to me, he runs pretty hard for like a speedster, and he's physical, but he's getting banged up and that sort of thing. And I just overall look at Atlanta and it's like, their starting center gets put on IR, Drew Dahlman, and it's like they have a, that sort of thing. And that O-line was kind of one of the reasons why, people were like, oh, this is why Kirk can succeed. He's not going to have to run or move around or anything like that. He's going to be able to dish it to London Pitts and all these weapons that they have. But it's just like, I just don't see it. And as far as I'm concerned, they could have been 0-4 if they essentially didn't have, if they essentially weren't given, against the Eagles, I mean, they were given an easy sort of window to win, at the end of that game where it's like the Eagles played some hokey defense where it's like, oh, Kirk does a couple of sideline passes in a gap in the zone, even though you have a man coverage football team. I don't know what Fangio was covering. And they essentially kick a field goal because, I mean, that's the only other thing about their offense that I like is that Younghoe Koo is a solid kicker. He's going to make, his field goals, type of thing. But it's like, it's not like they have as crazy of a defense as like Pittsburgh. I don't think that this defense can carry them all season. I think they're good, but I don't think they have the like it factor with their pass rushers. I think Judon was a great pickup, obviously. He's going to fill that void. He's going to get pressure, and he's been doing work on this team. But it's like you don't have the key like disruptors that you do in like the pass rush that, some of these other teams have, that X factor, type of thing. That, player that sets themselves apart from everyone else. But enough with looking at, Atlanta. I want to talk about Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, clearly 3-1, playing really well. I'm glad Baker finally found his home. He obviously didn't do too well against Denver. I think the team, I'm not sure what was going on. Maybe Denver's defense is really figuring it out again. And, they're not far removed from being like, a top 3 defense from a couple years ago. The Buccaneers handled Philadelphia. They really showed that like, oh, hey, Philadelphia might not be anything. They ran the ball fairly effective against them when, Philadelphia's got a pretty stout run D and disruptive run D. And then it's like, they beat Detroit in a tight one. They beat Washington, which, granted, Jaden Daniels, was still finding himself at that point. But it's like, this is a team that looks like they are well coached. And I wouldn't say built to win because they do have, stars, but they have kind of a lack of talent. But they're performing really, really well, and they're playing as a team. And it's not one of these where it's like, oh, yeah, we have too many injuries, and we have a lack of talent. Godwin's having a great year. He's one of those wide receivers that I'm like, when he's healthy, he's one of the best in the league. It's why, with Brady, he was cooking teams. He was cooking teams years ago. And, now with Baker, he's doing kind of the same thing. Mike Evans, while he's, still going to get his catches and his touchdowns because he's such a mismatch and he's such a big target wide receiver in the end zone, is doing well. And I have no doubt that he's going to, be there when they need him most. And I mean, just overall, to me, I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the fear going into last week was their run game. They were able to run it pretty well against like I said, Philadelphia, who I think has a pretty good run defense. And, if they can get that going, they can really have a more balanced offense, because that is what's hindered them for years now. Even in Brady's like last year with Tampa Bay, I mean, their run game was abysmal for whatever reason, but they have a very solid team. And I do think the offense will have to carry them a bit if they get, deep into the season or whatever, because I mean, the defense is good, but it's like, besides Vita Vea and like Antoine Winfield, they have quite a bit of, unknowns on this team, I think, with their team and that sort of thing. I mean, I like, their players. They got a good mix of, young and veteran. And then, I mean, Levante David, I'm sorry, I guess that I forgot about him. He's good. Jamel Dean is playing well, and overall this wide receiver core to me is kind of young, and, we'll see how they develop, but it's like, this is a team that's doing very good for themselves. And I think that they're shutting out the noise that like, oh, Atlanta was going to win this division. Like, everybody said it when they got a QB. But with that, and with me talking about this, I'm going to read off I don't actually have anything written down. I'm going to say my prediction, for this game. I think Atlanta's defense will keep them in this game, just like, previous games, but I kind of expect, for it to be a hard game for them to win, because I think that the Buccaneers have just a very good run defense. I think that, Vita Vea, is a stud. Like, this guy, is disruptive. He stuffs the run unlike any other. I think that Atlanta's going to have to rely on Kirk's arm. And unless he finally like turns it up and plays like, like how much he's getting paid, I just don't see him winning it. And I think that the Buccaneers are looking to kind of cement themselves as the true champions of this division that are worthy of winning the division title. After, everyone was talking about the Saints, they've, slid out of favor a little bit. Then everyone was talking about the Falcons in the offseason. The only team that wasn't talked about in this division was Carolina, and even they've, created a buzz, because of not last week's win, but the week before, when they benched Bryce Young. But as far as I'm concerned, it is the Buccaneers' division to lose. And I think that they're going to go to the Superdome, and they are going to show that they are much more capable than Atlanta is, and a lot more better functioning of a team, barring that, they have some huge collapse and like Bijan, happens to have a huge game or something crazy. But I just don't see it. I think that the Buccaneers are really well coached. I think that Atlanta, well, they definitely have the talent on paper. They're kind of looking like, definitely not as bad, but they're looking like the Browns. The Browns, who have had plenty of talent on paper for years, but they never put it together, mainly because of their offense. But it's like, the Falcons, I just don't see it. And my final score prediction for this game is I'm going to say the Falcons score. I'm going to say that the Falcons score 27. Or I'm sorry, no, the Buccaneers score 27. And I think the Falcons, I think they score 20. And that is my final prediction for this Thursday night football and the beginning of week 5 in the 2024 season. So if you guys have any comments, if you liked the video, please leave a like, subscribe. I would really appreciate it. But otherwise, I'll be glad to talk to you guys in the comments, and we'll see you all in the next video.